We are talking about self-destruction, procrastination, self-sabotage, all those dirty little things that most people don't want to talk about. Tonight, we are talking about self-sabotage, procrastination, mental destruction. I'm going to be covering some key points, some key topics, and we are really going to be diving deep into what self-sabotage is, why it happens, and how you can break out of it. Most people that I know have self-sabotage. Actually, in fact, everyone has it, or what they label as self-sabotage. I'm going to break some myths with it. I'm going to explain the neuroscience behind why it happens, how to make changes in regards to self-sabotage. I'm also going to be talking a lot about procrastination. It's something a lot of people talk about, where they say, you know, Michael, I commit to things and I don't follow through. I set myself for goals, don't follow through on them. So we're going to be talking about that. I'm also going to be talking a lot about self-sabotage, mental self-destruction, those negative voices that most people have inside their head, how to consistently deal with them. But I'm going to be diving into some things that you probably haven't heard before. You know, there are a lot of people out there who talk about this stuff, but I really wanted to dive deeper into why these things happen so that you understand them and why it may be not what you think. And so I'm going to break a lot of the myths and misconceptions around things like self-sabotage, self-destruction, procrastination. So first of all, when we're talking about mindset and when we're talking about psychology, there are a lot of people out there who have bought into this myth or misconception of positive thinking. And the reason why I call it a myth and misconception is because based on a lot of the study and the data and the research that I've got, is that the brain is always trying to go to its most stable format. So it's trying to create stability. Now, when we're talking about positives, if you study physics, a positive attracts a negative in order to stabilize. Now, this isn't what we're taught in things like the law of attraction and The Secret. And in fact, one of my good friends and colleagues, Dr. John Demartini, was in that program or in that course. When he was in there, he spoke quite heavily about this idea of the law of attraction, creating things like attraction and repulsion forces based in physics. Now, what was happening was they ended up cutting out a lot of that stuff because they wanted to target a certain audience where it was all positive and all happy and everyone, you know, is having these great things happen to them, which he clearly explained that's not how it works. So most people who have seen things like The Secret or who understand mindset and psychology buy into this idea of just positive thinking, and if you think positive, positive things happen. But based on the field of study of physics, that's not what happens, because in physics, anything that has a positive charge will attract a negative charge in order to create stability. So I went on a journey to start to find out more about this balancing principle, or this idea of stability that happens within the mind or in the psychology. And that's where I came across work from Dr. John Demartini, but I also came across ancient principles as well. And I noticed in a lot of ancient philosophies, from Chinese philosophy to Ayurveda to a lot of the ancient cultures or the older civilizations around the world, they had this idea of a balancing principle, and that's where yin and yang comes from. You can see it in many other forces as well. So there's an idea of a masculine force and a feminine force, and those two create a stability or a balance. Now, you can see that in relationships as well. You can also see these attraction forces happening in other fields of science as well. Like if you take chemistry, in chemistry, atoms and molecules are trying to stabilize and to stabilize their outer shell. If not, they become volatile and so on. So I'm not going to go too much into that, but you'll find that there is a lot of volatility in things that don't have stability. So we have to then ask ourselves a question based on this understanding, or, you know, if you believe that maybe, potentially, it could be a new idea, it could be a new thought, that maybe our brain is trying to create some form of stability. Now, I believe that a stable platform is the best place to, I guess, excel off of. So if you have a look at a house, you don't want to build a house off of an unstable foundation. Now, if you're trying to build a business and you've got a leader who is very mentally and emotionally unstable and is stressed all the time and has these huge peaks and troughs and, you know, is trying to chase all this exciting stuff, but then ends up in ruts, that's very, very unstable. Now, that's going to be very hard to build a business off of. And so I see a lot of business owners who have a lot of stress and a lot of worry and a lot of concerns, and they don't know how to manage their psychology and their mindset. And then they wonder why their business is always chaotic and they can't trust staff and there's all these fucking problems. That is probably part of it. Now, if you want a quality, intimate relationship and you're an unstable person, you're probably going to attract another unstable person because they're going to be your counterbalancer to try and create stability in the relationship. But it's going to be highly volatile. So coming back to this principle of the brain stabilizing, which I guess, you know, the philosophy's been out there for thousands of years. It's not reinforced in a lot of the psychology principles and NLP and all of that sort of stuff. So when we're looking at self-sabotage patterns, if we look at things from a place of stability, what is it helping us to do? How's it helping us to create more stability? What's going on? What I've found is over the years from studying mental and emotional balance and stability, you then start to dive into, well, how do people achieve? Now, I'm assuming most of you are on here because you want to achieve more, if not all of you. I mean, the personal development space is full of people who just are floating through life and want to be happy all the time and want everything to go well. But I find that they're not my community. The community that I consistently attract seem to be people that are extremely driven and they want to achieve more, they want to push hard. And so the rules of the game change when you're one of those people. This is why our community is called the Driven Mofos. Because what I found was before people would come to my events and they're like, I just want to be happy. I want life to be easy. I want everything to be okay. Like, I just want to be comfortable. And I'm going, holy shit, this is crazy, because people who try to consistently achieve this idea of a comfortable life tend to not push themselves. And when they don't push themselves, they become extremely unhappy and it makes them extremely uncomfortable. So I don't know about anyone else out there, but the more you crave comfort, I've found that most people who consistently their goal is comfort normally live an extremely uncomfortable life, and they're very rarely people that achieve a lot. Some of the most successful people that are some of the most comfortable people I've ever met are also those who tend to work extremely hard. They're good producers, they push themselves hard, they're good at dealing with stress, they're good at dealing with problems, and they just tend to enjoy the process of life, of being better. And so their focus isn't happiness, and their focus isn't comfort, their focus is growth. Now, those who tend to focus on growth tend to grow, but growth comes from a couple of challenges. One of the things that causes growth in nature is stress. So anything in nature that has stress will normally either grow or it dies. Now, there is a certain balance of stress that we need in order to grow. So, for instance, if you have a tree that's in a drought, that tree will either die off or it will tap down deeper roots in order to get more water. So it actually becomes stronger. So by the time the next drought hits, it's actually strong and it's very stable and it's tapped down, it's got deeper roots. So what I've found is that there are so many people out in our society that have been convinced that the goal of life is happiness. But what I've also found is that if you look at the law of stability or the law of balance, those who crave happiness tend to be extremely unhappy because they feel it's this fleeting thing that just goes all the time. It's like, I'm working really, really hard to try to be happy, and they're trying to be something, and then they get momentary happiness and then it goes away again, and then they're extremely unhappy. But that's creating a whole bunch of unrealistic expectations. So those unrealistic expectations set the person up to be unhappy in the first place. So that's the first thing, is most people who are chasing a one-sided life end up with the opposite side coming true. Those who tend to focus on comfort tend to not make the decisions that they need to make in order to grow, in order to push, in order to expand. And so because of that, most people who comfort is their goal of life tend to live extremely uncomfortable. So once you understand this balancing methodology, or this, I guess you could call it a universal law, in Chinese philosophy, they called it yin and yang. Now, in yin and yang philosophy, one of my friends is a Chinese medicine practitioner, and he'll say that the more the darkness grows, the more the light has to expand also. So as the circle expands in the yin and yang principle, the other side also expands. So the more one person craves comfort, the more discomfort is created at the same time, and they don't even realize it. And then the more that someone tries to crave certainty, the more uncertain stuff becomes in their life. And so this principle seems to be a consistent principle that you can see in human psychology over and over and over again. And as being someone who's dealt and worked with tens of thousands of people now, it's so obvious when someone comes to me and they just say, I want to have a comfortable life. And I go, do most of the time you feel uncomfortable? Like, you're stressed out? Does it put a lot of pressure on you? And they're like, oh, all the time. So what happens is that most people, first of all, set themselves up for unrealistic expectations in life, because humans are part of nature. And as I mentioned before, everything in nature grows or it dies. Nothing stays the same. So as humans, we have to decide, do we want to grow, or are we slowly killing off parts of our lives? If you work extremely hard to make money, you might be growing the area of money, but at the same time, if you don't put some focus into your health and into your lifestyle, you may be killing off your lifestyle and you may be killing off your health. Some people spend all their time focusing on their idea of health, but at the same time, it's killing their mental health, because at the same time, they're not checking in to see whether their idealisms of health are healthy or unhealthy, and if they're causing these other problems in their life. So first of all, we have to understand, in nature, things grow or things die. Now, things grow because of stress. So if we don't want stress and we're always stress avoidant and we're looking for a happy life all the time, we want to be comfortable, then we're probably going to create a lot of discomfort, a lot of stress. It's called distress. So there's two types of stress. There's eustress, which is spelled EU, and then the word stress, so eustress, or distress. Distress is when there's too much chaos to handle. Eustress is beneficial stress where we handle the stress in order to consistently grow. So in life, either you're in control of the stress or the stress is in control of you. I guess you could say the stress is out of control. But it's a very fine line because optimum growth happens at high levels of stress. So if you're someone who wants to grow and you want to expand, then you need high levels of stress in order to keep growing, keep growing, keep growing. I know that we've had like rapid expansion of our business in certain stages of the growth, and I have to try and slow it down because if not, it's too much stress. And not only does it stress me out, it stresses the team out. So as a business owner and a leader, I have to then try and pull things back to manage things, to make sure that things don't get too out of control. But if you pull that stress back too much, things stop growing, and then that creates its own problems. So there are a lot of people in life who are stress avoidant, and then they wonder why their whole life is just chaos and shit keeps falling apart and there's always these problems and they can't get on top of everything. And it's like they're completely out of control. And that normally comes with the victim mentality. It normally comes with idealisms and what the perfect life should look like. It comes with unrealistic expectations, poor planning, poor mindset. These are some things that can cause large amounts of stress and large amounts of pressure. Now, so first of all, you've got in nature, things grow or things die, nothing stays the same. So I would assume that most people in here that want to achieve more, the goal then of your life is to grow. Grow, which means stress. But you need to make sure it's eustress, beneficial stress. Because if not, it can turn it into distress. Now, it's a very fine line. You know, there's some days where I'm like, I set all my day up, everything goes great, and then by lunchtime, I'm straight away in distress. I'm like, holy shit, there's stuff going everywhere. Okay, I need to reprioritize. I need to refocus. I need to maybe journal for a minute and get everything back under control, and then off we go again. Because I'm trying to find the limits of the stress that's going to give me the maximum growth without it becoming too much stress. And no one ever gets it right all the time. That's the cool thing about life is when we think we've figured it out, we haven't. We just get reminded we haven't. And then there's another level. And then there's another level. And just on that, it's very, very interesting. I was watching a documentary a while ago. I think it was called Man's Search for Infinity. And it was about two scientists and mathematicians who were some of the greatest mathematicians in the world. And they were looking for infinity, what infinity is. And they ended up finding the mathematical equation of infinity. But when they really started diving deep into what infinity was, they actually found that there was another level of infinity. Then they studied it more and they found that there was another level and another level. And the more that they kept diving into infinity, they realized that infinity was an infinite scale that never finished. One of them ended up in a mental institution and the other one committed suicide because it was just too much for their brain to comprehend that there may be something that's completely infinite that just keeps going and going and going. Now, the reason why I tell you this is because in our own lives, when we think we've mastered a level, there's another level. And that level has new problems, it has new stresses, it has new pressure. If we focus on how we feel, we're going to feel like we never get on top of anything. But if we stop and reflect on our life and our growth, we will see that we've actually grown up levels and you start to grow beyond people around you. So my recommendation is if you're someone who's driven, you can't reflect on your stress, because if you reflect on your stress and go, I'm still stressed, you may be growing to new heights and taking on bigger problems and solving bigger issues, which is great. That shows a lot of growth. And as a person, you're expanding a lot. But if you just focus on the stress, you go, I'm still stressed. And then the fantasy or the delusion that you have might be, I'm going to get rid of stress. You'll never get rid of stress because stress is part of growth. And in order to grow, we have to have stress. But then the key is, how much stress can we take on before it becomes distress and we become overwhelmed, and that can cause a health crisis or a mental health crisis if, we have too much distress for too long? How can we create that eustress where we get optimal stress that creates maximum growth and we expand as a person and also get the results that we want in life without destroying everything? Now, that's a very, very fine line. And that's why I spoke about infinity. So the reason why I'm talking about this is because a lot of people set themselves up straight away to fail in life because they don't understand life. Now, as a kid, I was never taught that our goal in life is to take on maximum stress in order to have maximum growth, which allows us to feel fulfilled and to grow and to keep going. What I got told is that, we work hard so that we can make a good living, and then we can go and buy stuff that makes our life easier. And so I had this idea that if I work really, really hard, everything gets easier. And then when I started my business, I was like, cool, when I have enough staff and they can do all this stuff and they can do all the hard stuff and I can just do the fun stuff. And then what happened was I realized that all that happened was I just got more and more stressed out because I'm like, shit, I'm still not doing all the fun stuff and staff aren't as effective as what I wanted. And there's all this pressure and all this stress. And that's when I started realizing that it's not about getting rid of the stress. It's about making sure that I'm growing and that I'm working towards something meaningful in my life. So when you're clear with what you're working towards, which is meaningful, then you use that as a benchmark for your growth. And also you'll notice that you start growing beyond other people. Over time, you start outgrowing friends, you start outgrowing people around you, you start thinking differently. You're like, shit, I can't believe that most people around me don't understand what I understand. But that's because mentally and emotionally, you've grown beyond that. And if you do that, you'll actually find that life's really, really enjoyable, but you've got to reset your benchmarks. For me, my whole life when I was younger, up until probably about 35, was I want life to be easy. I want to be comfortable. I want to be financially independent. I want business to operate well so that I can just go out and teach all the time and I can just learn and everything's going to be easy. And then that all just got completely destroyed because I couldn't understand why for about a year and a half straight, I was completely stressed the fuck out. Distress, not good stress, distress. Losing sleep, why isn't everything working? And I had all those shitty questions a lot of people have. But what I realized was it was just life rattling the shit out of my brain to tell me that the things that I was thinking about weren't part of the journey of life and that I had to break away my thought processes and the stuff that I'd been taught when I was younger in order to excel. So now I know that every day there is stress. It's good because I'm growing. But now my goal is to manage that stress. And then whether I move into distress or whether I move into eustress, all depends on my ability to manage my mindset and my psychology and to see things as they are, to ask really high quality questions so that I can solve problems effectively, to make sure that my team are working effectively, and to make sure that we're on the path to consistently moving towards that mission. And the more that I do that, every day I can see us chipping away and chipping away and chipping away. And so because of that, I'm fulfilled. Because the benchmark that I set for life is different than the fantasy and the delusion that I used to have of an easy life, financial freedom, everything's going to be easy. If I have the perfect team, then the business is just going to run well without me and everyone's not going to rely upon me, which that's part of it. Like I've got a great team at the moment and it's super effective, but we're a team. So like in any sport, you can't take and remove one position and expect that everything's going to operate the same way. So I'm part of that team. My job now is to be part of that team and make sure that everything's working effectively and that I'm in it. So I have to be consistently in it. Coming back to it, maximum growth happens at maximum stress without it turning into distress. So maximum eustress. The second thing that I want to break the fantasy and delusion is that everything in the universe expands or contracts, nothing stays the same. So you can study any field of science, and look, I could be wrong on this, but after having studied many, many fields of science, everything seems to either expand or contract. Nothing stays the same. Now, expansion always happens through pressure. So if we're not consistently taking on pressure, then we're not expanding, and if we're not taking on stress, we're not growing. So if we're a driven person that wants to achieve great things in life, we have to then start to get comfortable with the philosophy of pressure and stress. But it's how you control the pressure and the stress. If you set up fantasies of though I shouldn't have all this pressure and I shouldn't have all this stress, then maybe it's distress. Or the other thing might be is that maybe you've got a delusion that life shouldn't be that way. And that's probably one of the things that fucks people up the most. Okay, I have to deal with this stuff every day. Business shouldn't be this stressful. Life shouldn't be this hard. I shouldn't be sabotaging all the time. I shouldn't have these problems. My kids should just do this stuff. And there's all these shoulds that they set themselves up for absolute failure. So we've got to be careful of those patterns. The other thing that we have to be careful of if you want to grow is that you've got to be careful with the victim mentality and playing the victim card. That the more responsibility that you can take on, now it doesn't mean that you're responsible for everything that happens, but what it means is asking the question, what was my responsibility in this situation? How could have I avoided it? How could have I done something different? How could have I changed it? Like, what could have I done? Because when you get those learnings and lessons, you get to take them into the future as new knowledge. If you don't, you normally repeat the pattern. And so what I've found over 2 decades now of studying human behavior is that anything that we don't learn from, we get to repeat the pattern. So our life is a consistent, direct reflection of our ability to learn and use those learnings. And the things that we haven't learned, we end up in something called a vicious cycle. And that vicious cycle creates pain for us so that we become more aware and we become more reflective. So when most people are in pain, they reflect. That doesn't mean that their reflection's good. Okay, a lot of people aren't taught how to reflect effectively or how to use their mindset to think through things and ask themselves good questions to figure things out. So what most people do is when they're stressed, they become reflective. Now, that can also create more stress and more pressure and more problems when they don't know how to operate their mindset effectively, ask the right questions, untangle everything, and get the learnings out of it. So then what most people do in our society is they drink, they take drugs, they go and get medicated, they avoid the pattern, which means they might get caught up in other people's drama. So they'll start talking about other shit. They're worried about what Kim Kardashian's doing. And they judge, what happened at the Brownlow. And then they watch sport and football and all that stuff all weekend because then they can say, that team's shit, they're crap. And they can point out everyone else's inefficiencies and ineffectiveness. And for a while, it takes everything away. So they forget about it. But then eventually they repeat the pattern again. And then they go, fuck, why am I still stuck in this shit? Like, I can't understand it. I've been going through this crap for ages and I can't figure it out. Well, first of all, you've got a mindset pattern that you don't know how to dig the learnings out of. And so because of that, you're bound to repeat the pattern. And then the second thing is you consistently use distractions in order to avoid learning what you need to learn so you don't repeat those things. They're part of the patterns. Now, let's get into self-sabotage and procrastination and self-doubt and all those sort of things and how we start to unblock our mental blocks. So first of all, I spent a long time creating our Thrive Time event. Now, it keeps getting updated. Every year it gets updated. Normally, every couple of months it gets updated. And the reason why I do that is because I'm looking for the greatest human behavior tools on the planet. And as you can probably see behind me, if you're watching this, you can see that I study a lot. I mean, they're not just there for looks. I wish I'd spent that much money on books just for the looks. Yeah, I read a lot and I do a lot of research and I do a lot of study and I travel all around the world and I'm trying to learn from the smartest people that I can get access to. Because what I'm trying to find out is how, first of all, do I become the most successful that I can become and live the greatest life that I can possibly live. That's me being selfish. But part of that journey is I also realized from a young age that I love learning and I love bettering myself. And so because of that, I wanted to share what I've learned along my journey with other people, using myself as a crash test dummy. So I went and did all the positive thinking events and I'm fist pumping the air and I'm getting all jacked up. And then I couldn't understand why I kept burning out. And I'm going, shit, why do I end up in these ruts? I couldn't figure it out. I did all the health stuff. So I was, I had chronic fatigue when I was younger. So I'm doing all the organic eating and eating all this organic food and I'm still bloody tired all the time and I couldn't figure it out. And then what I realized was the more mentally and emotionally unstable I am and the more I keep searching for these positives and these highs and being energetic all the time, the more I would burn out. And I noticed that after going to a lot of motivation events where I'm high-fiving the air, fist pumping and jumping up and down, the more I would do that, the more I would burn out afterwards. So I would notice normally the day or 2 days after that event, I would crash and I would stay in a rut and then I'd start beating myself up. You've set all these big goals. You've got these unrealistic expectations like I just want to be productive all the time and I just want to achieve all this great stuff. Yet you're lying on the couch going, I'm burnt out, I'm so tired. And your brain's kicking in going, you lazy piece of shit. What are you doing? Get up, go do stuff. You've got all this stuff to achieve. What are you doing? They're achieving stuff. You're not achieving stuff. And you start creating self-comparisons to other people. The more I did that, the more I found myself in these huge mental and emotional peaks and troughs because I thought that I could be hyperactive without being hypoactive. I couldn't figure out why I had all these big goals and dreams that kept popping up in my head, but I'd kept self-destructing. It wasn't until I realized that there is a bunch of things that you need in order to stay efficient and effective. And the goal of life isn't to have highs. The goal of life is to be consistent. Now, I know that I've been training now at the gym. I first started lifting weights when I was 14 years of age. Now, I haven't missed longer than, I don't think, a week, maybe a week and a half max, and that's if I'm sick. Since I was 14, I'm now 39. It's been a long time. Now, when I look at that, I don't even think about, shit, I gotta go to the gym today. I just wake up and I just train. Why? Because the consistency helps. Now, is my diet always consistent? Probably not. Do I gain weight? Yes. Do I lose weight? Yes. Is my training, though, consistent? Yes. Now, when I look at that, it's just because I book it in my calendar and I just go and get it done. And then what I found was that things in my life that had these consistent volatilities, the more I kept setting myself up with volatilities, the more shit would become volatile. So the more I would go on fist pump the air and jack myself up and get all motivated, the more I'd crash. The more sugar and shit I ate and the more I would eat all this crazy food and binge eat, the more guilty I would feel. But then afterwards, the more I push myself really hard in training. And so I would train really hard. And then all of a sudden, bang, I'm burnt out and I'm tired again. I'm like, shit, why don't I feel like training today? Why don't I feel like exercising? I would naturally have this sabotage pattern where I would overeat food and I would binge eat, and then I would feel guilty. I would feel like shit. I'd beat myself up. And then 2 days later, I'm at the gym training hard again. And so my life was high intensity, high crash, high intensity, deep rut, high intensity, deep rut, high intensity, deep rut. And I wondered why I couldn't get this consistency and this traction. Whereas when I look at the one thing that I've been consistent with, which was the gym at the time, I was just consistent. I would wake up, I would go train. Now, it was the hard and the intensity that I was pushing myself that would create the peaks and troughs, but I would still train most days, right? I might miss 1 or 2 days every couple of weeks or whatever. But I found that my mental and emotional peaks and troughs were causing me to self-destruct. So what I found was that after studying a lot of different human behavior, after going to lots of different courses, I've spent over $1 million on study up to this date, okay? It's a lot. And what I found was that there were some consistent things that you had to get. First of all, you have to understand where you're heading in life, and you've got to understand yourself. Now, from a young age, the first thing you probably said was no. That's one of the first words that children learn, no, because they're telling you what they don't want. But the first thing that parents normally teach their kids is no. And so the child starts to learn no really, really early. Now, that comes from implanted or projected values and beliefs from other people. So when a parent says don't do that, the child doesn't do it in the hope to please the parent. Because the parent, if you have a look at the survival response and the survival mechanism, the child needs food, safety and sustenance. It needs a roof over its head, and it needs nurturing, okay, in order to survive. Imagine having a child and all of a sudden you go to feed the child and all it does is just shit all the time and eat food, which is essentially a newborn. And that child tells you to go fuck yourself. You just go, why did I even have this thing? And so there's a high likelihood that you probably wouldn't want it. So the child then starts to adapt its behavior in order to get exactly what it needs. Safety, nourishment, and security. And then also it gets nurtured. And so the child then starts to adapt its behavior for the parents or the parental figure. So over time, as the child starts to grow, it keeps adapting its behavior in order to try to please others. And it will do it then for grandparents. It then starts to do it when it goes to school in order to fit into a group. Because this is also a survival response. Humans have this, I guess you could say, more primitive part of the brain where our natural survival response is to fit in. Because if we were kicked out of the tribe 1,000 years ago, you might have to sleep outside tonight and the lion, the tiger, the jaguar or whatever could come and eat you. So there's this natural response where we want to fit in because it keeps us safe and it protects us. But in this day and age, it's also the thing that traps us. Because a lot of people that I know and who come to our events and are also part of the community want to go out and want to achieve all this great stuff. They want to do things that are better than the normal or the average. And so then you start doing stuff, you get some criticism, you go, oh shit, maybe I need to adapt my behavior because maybe I've upset someone. And so over time, you start adapting your behavior from a really young age. And that's because of the implanted values and the implanted beliefs of others. Now, most people have imbalanced beliefs and biased beliefs. They also have different values to you. And so your values and their values are going to clash. Like I have a high value on teaching and learning, but there are a lot of people who write stuff on my Facebook wall and they're like, I can't believe that anyone would spend this money to go to your events. You're a scam artist. I can't believe anyone would do this. Yet at the same time, they've just spent $40,000 going and getting a university degree. And that university degree, they're going to go to uni and potentially, like some people, they will go to university, get their degree, and then realize it's not what they want to do. And then so they've just wasted $40,000. Yet they perceive that I'm the scammer because they don't actually have a high value on learning. They had a high value on pleasing others, which maybe it was their parents who told them to go to university. So what happens is their values clash with my high values, which is teaching and learning. I love teaching people what I learn. So they don't perceive the value in what I do. Whereas there are other people out there, probably like most of you who are on here tonight, who have a high value of learning, being better, and self-growth. So you're not going to have that same clash. You're probably like, this is cool, I get to learn. You'll have friends that sit there and go, why the fuck would you spend a night watching this shit? Like, this is just, why? Like, just live your life, man. Don't worry about it. It's just, this is all bullshit. But that's because their values don't align with that. They don't have a high value on teaching and learning potentially. Or they might have a high value on the style of learning. So some people will only learn in a university system because that's what they've been indoctrinated into thinking. And that's what they think learning is. Some other people just don't see any value in it. Some people have a very high value of wealth creation. Then there's a whole bunch of other people out there who have no value on wealth creation. So they will call the wealth creators scammers and frauds. And, you know, they just rip people off and they don't give a shit about people. But they're not. They're just living their values. And so there always has to be a counterbalancer and people counterbalancing each other with their values. But the important part is, in order to achieve great things in your life and stop self-destruction or prevent as much self-destruction as you can and self-sabotage, the first thing that you have to do is to get clear with your values. You need to know what your values are and their priority order, because then you can make good, clear decisions. And it's not about what you say yes to, it's about what you say no to. I get invited to shit all the time. People invite me to stuff. You should come out drinking, you should come to this party. And I go, look, I would love to, but I can't make it. Why? Because if you have a look at my value structure, I don't want to go out on a Friday and Saturday night and get absolutely smashed with everybody. I'll go out and drink every now and again. I went out on Friday night and had drinks and I enjoyed it. I had a good night. I got home at 1:30 in the morning, but I suffered Saturday and Sunday as well. I wasn't that effective. Would I do that every weekend? No way, because it removes me away from my mission. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So the first thing is your values. You have to understand what they are. Then what you've got to do is you've got to clarify those values, because not only do you need to understand what your values are, you need to understand what the value order is, and you also have to understand what those values mean to you in your own unique way. So my highest value is connection, but I call it high value connections, because I love connecting with people that love to learn, and I also love connecting with people that love to teach. So that's why at most of our events, I go out and I hang out with the participants, because I love to teach, but I also love to learn. Now, I don't like hanging out with people who just like to talk about random shit all the time, because that, to me, that's not my way that I connect. My second highest value is teaching and learning, but it's related to my purpose of human behavior. So that's my expertise, is human behavior. And the majority of stuff that I teach in business is all around people and human behavior, and that's my expertise. Because what I realize is that almost every problem in business is a human-related problem. Very rarely do you not have a human behavior problem in a business. Marketing is human behavior, sales is human behavior, leadership is human behavior. I mean, pretty much everything in business is human behavior. Yeah, it's the thing that most business owners focus the least on, right? They'll go to a sales course and they'll learn about sales, but they don't learn about fucking how to deal with people. And they don't learn about how to deal with problems. They might follow a script really, really well, or they might understand the sales process, but they don't understand how to deal with different personalities and different values and assess all those things. So my point is that, first of all, in order to break self-sabotage, procrastination, and in order to deal with this stuff, you've got to get clear with what your priorities are in life and what life is for you in your own unique way, which is your values order. Then you need to get really, really clear with what your purpose is in life, and your purpose comes off of your highest values. And then finally, once you've got your purpose and your values, you then need to understand what lifestyle balance looks like to you. Now, for me uniquely, I like to work anywhere between 50 to 70 hours a week. That's like my average. Now, for most people, they're like, why do you work so much? Why? Because I want to. This is what I enjoy. For me, this shit's not work. Like, it's 8 o'clock at night here in Adelaide and I'm just doing what I love. I was up at 5:30 this morning. What was I doing? I was doing what I love. I woke up, I did some reading, I got up, I trained. Then from there, I got ready for a client, and then I've had a client all day. I've been coaching them because they've flown over from interstate. So I've been working with them all day, did some podcasts, and then bang, I'm back onto this. And then I'll probably work until 9:30, 10 o'clock tonight. That's a normal night for me. That's what I enjoy. So my idea of lifestyle balance is completely different to someone else. You might have a full-time mother who's staying at home with their kids. They might put in 40 to 50 hours with the kids a week. Now, if you drop that down to 10 hours, they might feel completely unfulfilled and like be stressing about their kids the whole time because their high values dictate that they're unfulfilled. So the idea of lifestyle balance has been completely destroyed by an ideal which is ridiculous, and that is that we need to have all areas of life completely balanced in a perfect way. It will never happen. It never has happened, and it's completely dictated based on your values. So for me, I can train 2 hours a day and I love it. And I can do that for 6 days a week. I normally take 1 day off. To me, that's enjoyable training. For some people, their idea of training 2 hours once a week is like a nightmare. And for some people out there who don't have a high value on career or a high value on business or a high value on wealth creation, they might not want to work a 60 or 80 hour week. But for those people who do, they love it. So it is really, really important to understand, and that can come in many different forms too, by the way. Like when I've worked with scientists before, those scientists might work 100 hours a week and they've been working 100 hours a week for 30 or 40 years in order to do research. And that's just what they do. That's what they enjoy. But that's someone else's idea of a nightmare. So first of all, you have to get clear with your values. You've got to get clear with your purpose. And you also have to understand your own unique lifestyle balance and what that looks like. And normally you do that through a bit of trial and error, and you get feedback in life and you start to adapt your life based on those things. That's what I call pillar number 1 of our Thrive Time event. So that there is where you find your fulfillment. Now, when you're fulfilled, you're less likely to self-sabotage, you're less likely to procrastinate, and you're less likely to self-destruct. So there's a little bit of a key for where we're going already. So in pillar one, you've got to find out what actually fulfills you. And it can't be based on bullshit emotional volatilities like being calm all the time or everything being easy. Like when I wake up in the morning, I don't think about an easy day. I think about getting shit done and achieving things and growing. That's what I think about. Because I know that worrying about having an easy day, it normally ends up in absolute carnage and destruction and bullshit. So I don't even think about it. I was working with a client last week who's a very successful business owner, and he's like, I just keep thinking about, how I want to be happy and what happiness looks like. And he kept talking about happiness. And I said, when was the last time you had happiness? And he said, well, yeah, the other day I was happy. And I said, excellent. How long did it last for? I don't know, an hour or two. And I said, excellent. Was it really an hour or two, or did you have a moment of happiness and then another moment a little bit later and another moment, another moment? And you just generalized it and said, I was happy. And he went, yeah, okay, that's a good point. Throughout the day, I had many different emotions that came up, but overall, I was generally happy. And I went, okay, so it's a generalization. But you also know that it didn't last. So therefore, when have you ever just been happy for an extended period of time? And when we really broke it down and we nailed it, he's never really been happy for an extended period of time. Just like he hasn't been sad for an extended period of time. He has moments of sadness, moments of happiness, moments of stress, moments of frustration. Because our emotions are consistently regulating throughout the day. And our awareness on those emotions, normally, we will grab them and generalize them, and that will determine how we feel throughout the day. So when someone says, I had a good day, that's a gross generalization of, so 86,400 seconds in a day. So when someone said, I've had a good day, is that all 86,400 seconds? How do you determine that? So people just grab shit and then make it up. So at the end of the day, they go, I had a good day today. I had a crappy day. Okay. You mean you had a couple of moments and then you just generalized it, and because of that, that's how you've determined your day. That's not true though. It's not the truth. It's just a generalization. Humans do that consistently. So first of all, you've got to figure out pillar one of our success map, which is fulfillment. You've got to figure out what fulfills you. Also, you're more likely to be successful when you're doing things that you're actually fulfilled in and where you can take on maximum stress and maximum pressure, because that's where you're going to get maximum growth. Now, the area that you're going to get maximum stress and maximum pressure without getting overwhelmed is going to be in your highest values. So that's going to be your lane in life, your lane that you stick to. Then you jump into the next area, which is direction. And direction comes from mission, from getting clear with what your future looks like and your future mission. But if your mission doesn't align with your values, it's a fantasy. Now, most people create fantasies and delusions around what their goals and mission are in life because they're trying to escape emotions. And again, this is the distortion thing. Most people are distorted in their goals because they go, well, I just want to be happy. So therefore I'm setting goals that I think are going to make me happy. But the truth is, happiness is a shit metric for life. So their goals aren't accurate. And then most people don't set goals effectively in the first place. If they're elated and excited, they will tend to overestimate their skill sets, and they will underestimate the time that it takes in order to achieve those things. So they'll create unrealistic expectations on time, and they'll also overestimate their skill set. And so when they're rushing hard to try and achieve something, they're probably going to have high levels of anxiety, high levels of distress, higher levels of pressure than what they can handle. So they're going to burn out and self-sabotage and self-destruct. When you set clear, effective goals, you just calmly implement. You listen for feedback in your mind and your emotions. So if I set a goal that's unrealistic, I notice that I start stressing and I start rushing and adrenaline's high and I'm trying to rush. And so it creates an anxiety. It creates a high level of distress. And then what will happen is in your brain, you'll go, oh shit, I need to get away from this stuff. I need to get away. And so your brain starts thinking about holidays. It starts thinking about relaxation. It starts thinking about de-stressing because it's trying to relieve that stress. And so this is where most people start to self-sabotage. They'll go sit on the couch. They'll eat a block of chocolate. They'll overeat food. They'll drink beer. They'll take drugs. They'll medicate. All of those things normally happen as a byproduct of creating unrealistic goals or unrealistic expectations upon themselves. And so then it's going to lead to self-sabotage or self-destruction. Probably both of those things together. So we've got to get clear with a long-term mission or our long-term goal. And then once we get that mission, and providing it aligns with our purpose, our values, and also our lifestyle balance that we want, then we know that we've got a clear and effective mission. Once you're on the path to achieving that mission, you'll probably also get visions that pop up inside your head. And if they're consistent, you want to write them down. Because most people have visions that pop up inside their head, they just don't document them. So when I ask people, what do you want? They're like, well, I don't fucking know. I've been trying like all this different shit and I want that and I want happiness and I want to be calm. but it's probably helping you to get something that you're looking for in order to counterbalance something else. So, first of all, you've got the mission, and then you get these visions that pop up inside your head. Most people don't document those visions because they think they're irrelevant. Now, I had a vision since I was 21 years of age, which is me standing on a stage and speaking in front of tens of thousands of people. I've also noticed that over the years that's grown to working in the medical institute or running medical institutions and stuff like that, and sort of doing some transformation in the medical industry or in the health industry. Also working with business owners to make sure. I think business is a warrior sport, and I was just doing some study for our upcoming Business Growth Odyssey event. 56% of business owners don't last longer than 4 years. That was the stats that have just come out. So 54% of business owners don't make it past 4 years. So a lot of people are putting their life savings and everything into business. And I think that if I can help people with that, it's going to help not only them, but their friends, their family, create a lifestyle, also help employ more people and so on. And I think that that's really important. So that's a gift that I have and a strength that I have. So that's part of the visions that keep appearing. So I document them. I update my mission. I make sure that it aligns with my values and my purpose, because that gives me the unique way that I do it. I know the way that I help business owners is through my values. High quality connections, teaching and learning, business and wealth creation, and then also health and physical well-being. So I just use my values to help me to achieve my mission. And also it aligns with the visions that I keep having. So this then creates direction. Once you've got the visions and the missions, you can set clear goals. And then once you've got clear goals, you then use your emotions and what's going on for you to give you feedback as to how realistic or unrealistic those goals are on the time frames that you're setting. So if you have too much anxiety and you've got too much stress and you're running on adrenaline, you're probably setting goals that are unrealistic for the time frame. Not saying that you can't achieve them, but just based on the skill sets that you have and based on your competencies and the people you've got surrounding you currently. That doesn't mean that they can't speed up, and it doesn't mean you can't achieve them. It just means you've got to adjust them a little bit now. If you're just relaxed and lazy and you chilled out and you don't really have any energy and motivation, you need to start pushing the time frames a lot faster and a lot harder, making the goal a lot bigger. So you can tell a lot about a person and how they set goals, whether even if they set goals, written down, or whether they set them in their own head, based on how they behave. So if you've got someone who's high anxiety, highly driven, their goals that they have are normally big. Their time frames are unrealistic, so they normally have small compressed time frames. So they're trying to rush to get those goals done. And then from there, you've also got the skill sets. So the time frames and the skill sets have to align with each other. You've got to look at this consistent feedback that you're getting. If you're someone that's really lazy and you can't be bothered, maybe your goals aren't big enough, and maybe you're not tightening up the time frames enough in order to create some sort of an anxiety or stress to get you moving. We need to have things like adrenaline and dopamine. We use that as a reward system to get stuff done. But there's a nice balance. If you have too much dopamine or too much adrenaline, you can work really, really hard and you'll push yourself really, really hard and you burn out. Now, for a lot of the people that I work with that are extremely driven, I would assume that something that you've got to be very careful of is getting too much adrenaline pump and also using dopamine too much. Because if you're searching for quick fixes, if you're in a rush to try and achieve things, you're probably using adrenaline quite a lot, and you'll probably look for immediate gratification quite quickly and quite a lot. When you do that, you'll burn out. So you'll have ruts. You'll have energy ruts where you just fucking flatline. This is where I get a lot of people who say, I self-sabotage because I've got these big goals, but it's just that they're not managing their energy well and they're not managing their expectations well. That's pillar number 2. So pillar number 1 is understanding what fulfills you. That's in this success map that we teach at Thrive Time. Pillar number 2 is all about direction. If you're unclear on your direction, then you can work really, really hard, but you're probably going to end up somewhere you don't want to be. And most people in life are just working and they're trying to figure it out. And I ask them, I meet people all the time. I meet business owners and I'm like, cool, what are the goals? What's your next 90 days look like? And so on. And they're like, I don't know, I'm doing stuff. And I watch them, they just work flat out going nowhere. And most people in life work flat out and they go nowhere. When I talk to a lot of Australians, they're like, I just want to set myself up for retirement. I'm like, the fuck, you're like 22. What are you worried about? Like, you need to learn a lot. Like in your 20s, if I had my time again, my number 1 tip for anyone under the age of 30 is to spend as much money as you can on learning as much as you can. Because life starts to get serious around about 30. And so that's where they're trying to start to set their life up. But if you're worried about retirement when you're 30, you're already focused on the wrong thing. You should be focused now on starting to grow that fruit of all the effort and the energy you're putting into learning and growing. This is the perfect scenario, by the way. Different people have different stages of life and so on. But, 20s is about learning as much. I think if I have my time again, learning as much as you can and just spending as much as you possibly can on growing as much skill set as you can in the areas of your values, your purpose, and your mission. Then from there, once you understand yourself and you understand the skill sets you need and all that, you then start to plant all the seeds and start to slowly harvest. By the mid 30s and 40s, that's harvest time. That's where you start to crank everything up. And by the 50s, you're starting to work smarter, 60s working even better. And if you have a look, most people throughout their life who achieve great things are on this consistent upward trajectory. The average Australian is normally they're on an upward trajectory until their 20s, maybe late 20s, and then after that, it just flatlines until it goes downhill at retirement. Not a really great way of living, especially if you're a driven person. That's how most people live. To be honest, I'm 38. I can't think of anything more disgusting than retirement. What are you retiring from? Nothing in nature retires. Some people can retire from a sport career, but they'll go to a different career, and they're the smart ones. The unintelligent ones normally just end up in a complete rut and they end up completely self-destructive because they've got nothing else to go into. And this can also happen in retirement. So anyway, that's pillar number 2. Pillar number 3 of the success map is also understanding how to consistently create mental and emotional balance and to create more stability and to use performance tools in order to get your brain working right and to manage your emotions. The more stability you can have in here and the more stability you can have through your emotions, the more stable your actions and the more consistent they're going to be. So your thoughts drive your emotions drive your actions, and then your actions reinforce the thinking and so on. And so it just keeps going and going and going. When it comes to self-sabotage, I've already touched on it quite a lot, but self-sabotage essentially is misalignment of values and priority. I'll give an example. If my number one value is my family, let's say it's family, then career. So I've got my number one value is family, number 2 value is career, number 3 value is friends, and my 4th value might be my physical appearance. Now, if I decide that next week I'm going to start a new gym program. Now, this is just an example, by the way. These aren't my values and they're not my values order, but I see this happening almost on a daily basis with people, and it's so obvious and it's so easy to tell. So this person now decides that on Monday they're going to go to the gym, they're going to train 5 days a week, and they're going to exercise. So they've set this goal. But then what happens? On Monday they go, everything's gone great. Tuesday it's gone great. Wednesday it's gone great. But Thursday the kids are sick. And so now they're torn. Do I go to the gym or do I look after the kids? Do I go to the gym? But I've committed to 5 days at the gym. But shit, I've also got to look after my kids. But I've committed to 5 days. And so now they've got this TikTok going on in their brain. Who's ever had this before? That internal argument around, should I be doing this or should I be doing that? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? When you have that, there's a clash of values. And so your brain is trying to figure out what the priority order is. Now, if you're not clear on your values and you're not honest about your values and you're not honest about how to understand your values, then what happens is you'll go, shit, I need to look after my kids, but my goal is the gym, but my priority is really the kids. But my goal is the gym, but my priority is the kids. When you do that, that's where the internal chaos starts, because you've got a goal, but your values dictate the way you're going to behave. And so that person, if they go to the gym and don't look after their kids, they're going to feel like shit and a bad parent, and they're going to feel guilty and beat themselves up. But if they look after the kids, they're going to feel guilty because they didn't go to the gym, because it's going to be a clash of their goal, and they're going to feel like they're not achieving things. So they'll call that a self-sabotage pattern. So what most people call a self-sabotage pattern is actually an alignment of values and a misalignment of goals. So this person will probably take the kids. And when they take the kids, they're going to feel guilty because they've got the goal, but the goal doesn't take precedence over the values. And so when you know that, you go, well, my priority is that, and it's going to come at the expense of the goal, and you're fine with it. So you don't call it a self-sabotage pattern, you just readjust and off you keep going. But because most people are unclear on their goals, they don't understand the 3 pillars that I mentioned before, the 3 pillars that I teach at our Thrive Time event, and the 3 pillars that create your unique success map in life. Because most people don't understand that, then now they call it self-sabotage. They go, well, I fucked up my gym session, now it's all shit, now I'm going to eat. And so now they start this vicious cycle where they start beating themselves up. It brings up all of this past emotional imbalance stuff that they haven't worked through and haven't dealt with. And then now they're self-defeating, and then they're going to start Monday again. So on Monday, they decide, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to do 5 days a week. And let's say they have one good week. They go to the gym, everything works out well. But the 3rd week, all of a sudden, Monday comes, Tuesday comes, work pops up. Shit, I've got this big project for work. Do I take work, which is a high value, or do I stick to my goal of going to the gym? And then so now they have this conflict again. Do I work on this project that I need to get done, or do I go to the gym? Do I work? And so now they have this internal dialogue fight going on again. Because they don't understand that values always take priority over goals, from a psychological standpoint, and also values are the things in the correct priority order that make you fulfilled. When you understand that, the choice is obvious, right? That person needs to work, and they need to be okay with letting go of the goal of going to the gym. But because now they've got a self-comparison and there's someone else that they saw on Instagram who has a better body, and they feel fat because they've been eating some chocolate and they've been drinking some beer and they don't feel good about themselves. So now it brings up all these insecurities and this internal dialogue fight. And now they're like, but I fucked up my gym session. I should have gone to the gym, but I've got to work. And so now they start creating these got-tos and they feel torn about it. And then they're beating themselves up, and then that causes them to drink more. And now they're drinking and they're eating food again. They go, oh, fuck the gym session up. I need to start next week. And it starts all this self-depreciating cycle. Who's ever been through this before? I've had it most of my life. And it's taken a long, long time to work through this. That's why I use myself as a crash test dummy, and why I know that I teach some of the world's most advanced stuff on this, because I've used myself as a crash test dummy. From the kid that was kicked out of school at 15 to told that I had learning difficulties and that I probably had dyslexia and got put into special classes, to now someone who spent, over $1 million on study, read shitloads of books, being able to teach. I mean, shit, we have psychologists, we have medical doctors and all that stuff who come to our events. We have a lot of highly intelligent people who come to our events who want to learn a lot of this stuff. But my point is that I've gone into depth in this stuff because I had a lot of these patterns that I had to work through. I knew that there was something more, and I knew that there was something better that I could be doing with my life. You are probably someone who wants to be more driven, that you have higher expectations than the average person. But that also creates a lot of pressure on yourself, especially when you don't have your success map and those 3 pillars all properly structured and refined over time, because you'll have patterns that come up where your brain starts fighting with itself between its values and its goals, and you're unclear on stuff, and then you start to beat yourself up and self-depreciate, and then it causes these vicious cycles. And then when you go through those vicious cycles, they can spiral out of control, destroy your self-worth. All of those things happen when you're unclear with this stuff. You need to have those 3 pillars really clear, and you need to build out your own success map. What I realized from being around my niece and nephew and also working with kids, not that that's my specialty by any means, that's not who I work with, but I have worked with a fair few kids in the past, is that if you have a look at a child is unique, and a child is always extraordinary. Actually, I've never seen it. I've never seen a child that's not extraordinary. And I say that in a way because if you look at a child, if a child wants to go and play outside in the rain, you say, don't go outside, it's raining. The child looks and it just goes, no. And it tries to figure out how it can get what it wants. And 5 minutes later, you walk into the kitchen, bang, straight outside, right? So the child gets what it wants. The child lives its values. The child will figure shit out. The child will deal with problems. The child acknowledges its emotions, but it will acknowledge its emotions. It doesn't have self-control enough yet, though. That happens as the child starts to develop its prefrontal cortex. And that can happen, for men up until their late 20s. For females, it's early 20s, based on neuroscience and a lot of the studies. But my point is that a child can figure out what it wants and how to get it. Most adults I speak to, they're like, oh yeah, but I want to do this. Oh, but it's too hard. And, but I'm like, you don't understand. And yeah, and then they play the victim card. I'm like, what happens to that childlike enthusiasm? A child can figure out how to do what it wants. Most adults are like, oh, but I don't have the cash. I've had it this week, right? We have some tickets that I allow some business owners to come to our events that I know we can help. And so I will give them a day pass complimentary. And these people are business owners who need our help, who I know I can help, and who have problems that they need to work through. And I know we can do it. And I can probably save them a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of stress. And then a couple of days before the event, you always get 3 to 5 of them pull out. And I look at it and I go, isn't it interesting that they've got problems? They're stressed out. Yet they always make excuses, and then they wonder why their business isn't working. It's not that fucking hard to figure out that they're the problem. The biggest bottleneck in any business is always at the top of the bottle, right? And so business owners are always the bottleneck normally in their business until they scale to a really large size and they've got a large management team. Small to medium-sized businesses, it's always the business owner that's the biggest bottleneck. My point is that most adults stop themselves from achieving great things because they've lost that childlike enthusiasm, which is, I can figure it out, I will get it, I will find a way. Most adults will focus on their problems, they'll focus on the stress, they'll focus on the pain. They'll look on Instagram, compare themselves to others, that they look at all the shit that they're not, which is a really good way of figuring out what you're not doing in life and what you shouldn't do because it's not your highest value. When I see someone, a dude on Instagram with a 6-pack, I don't look at him and go, shit, I want to be like that, because I know that that comes at a cost and a lot of consequences. That's extremely hard and it's extremely dedicated. Do I want to dedicate my life to getting six pack and all of that? No, because that's not my values. That's not my lane. Because I'm super clear with my values, my purpose, my mission, my lifestyle balance, and all the shit that I'm trying to achieve. They might be looking at me and saying, shit, I wish I had that business and I wish I had the clientele. I wish I had the money, all of that stuff that I have. And someone else is looking at me going, shit, I wouldn't have that because I'd rather have a family and I wouldn't want to work that much. And that's completely understandable. So you need to really, for everyone who's watching this, if you want to have less self-sabotage, less procrastination, less mental destruction, less emotional volatilities, less energy volatilities, less vicious cycles in your life, then you need to get super clear and build your success map out and do it in a way that is productive for you, because you're unique as an individual. Unless you can figure out what your lane is in life, you're going to keep jumping across into other people's lanes and then wondering why you keep fucking things up and self-destructing. But it's obvious. You know, if I'm trying to compete in running against Usain Bolt, I'm going to look like a fucking fool. If I'm in the swimming pool and I'm trying to swim like Michael Phelps, no matter how much training I put in, I'm not going to beat Michael Phelps, because that's not what my gift is in life. That's not what I'm here for. That's not what my values suggest. I could do swimming for like 2 weeks and I'd probably give up because there's other shit I'd rather be doing. The clearer you are with the 3 pillars, what you're fulfilled with, what direction you're going and what your focus is, and then finally, knowing performance psychology tools to keep yourself mentally and emotionally stable, and to understand what self-sabotage patterns and procrastination is really telling you and the feedback it's giving you, then most people are just going to keep running in everyone else's lanes trying to figure out life, and that can be self-destructive in itself. So before I wrap up, because I know I could talk about this for probably, I could just do a whole day presentation just on self-sabotage, and then I could do a whole nother day just on procrastination. Essentially, if you look at it, when you have a self-sabotage pattern, or what you'd label as a self-sabotage pattern, what it's doing is it's giving you feedback that you have a misalignment of your values. So if you prioritize, when we go back to that person who family is their highest value, career is second, friends were third, and then fitness was fourth, when you look at that person's values, they're trying to shift the value of fitness up above the other values, which doesn't work. They're trying to push it up, but it's not going to get up there. Now, I hear a lot of stuff in NLP courses, and I've heard it in a lot of psychology and stuff, and they'll say you can change your values. But my question is why? Why would you change your values when they're unique to you, unless you're trying to be something that you're not, unless you're trying to fit into someone else's paradigm? No one's really able to answer that. Because the truth is that if you're trying to change your values and the values order, it's normally because you're trying to be something that you're not, and you're comparing yourself to others, which is creating a self-sabotage pattern and also self-depreciation. The best thing that you can do is to acknowledge the gifts that you have that are allowing you to be unique and to be great, and then to use those gifts in order to be skilled at something that you enjoy doing. And when you do that, you'll be able to do things in an effective way in order to achieve the things that you want. Now, if you want to live in someone else's lane and live someone else's life, then that's cool, but essentially you won't have your own life. You'll be living someone else's, which I think is also self-destructive. And I think probably the majority of the mental health industry really thrives because our society also thrives on trying to be something that they're not. And every time I've had someone come to any of our events like Thrive Time or any other event, or even just my one day events or whatever, and they have mental health issues, I know that they've spent the majority of their life trying to live in someone else's values, in trying to be something they're not, comparing themselves to others, beating the shit out of themselves, trying to please other people around them, and setting unrealistic expectations for life, having unrealistic comparisons and things like that. It normally leads to absolute fucking mental destruction. And you can do a whole bunch of magical, mystical shit, which is what a lot of the industry tries to do. You know, you can fucking put as many crystals on yourself as you want. You can go and have as much therapy and talk about how fucked up your childhood is. But the more you keep living outside of your lane, the more you keep trying to be something you're not, the more you keep trying to do the things that you're not gifted at, and the more you compare yourself to others, the more you're going to keep fucking up and the more you're going to keep beating yourself up. It's really that simple. And the more you do that, the more volatility it creates, because the more pressure you put on yourself, the more adrenaline spikes, the more it changes other hormonal sequences. So it can throw out things like testosterone, dihydrotestosterone, estrogen levels, progesterone. We have to understand that the stress hormones are a flight, fight, and freeze response. So that keeps us safe. Our stress hormones are there for our survival. When stress spikes and we have a distress response, when that happens, other hormones start to alter. So there are a lot of hormonal imbalances that people are having. You know, there's a whole theory in psychology that, you know, mental health issues are because of a chemical imbalance. But if you actually have a look at it, the chemical imbalance is highly probable that it is driven by an imbalanced perception around what people think that they should be, how they should be acting, how they should be behaving, trying to please others and trying to be something that they're not. And it's really easy to see this because if you test someone before stress and then you just tell them something that's stressful, The thought of something stressful in itself will change hormonal responses in the body, and it can change it quickly, like we're talking in milliseconds. So, stress is there to keep us safe. Our goal in life at the most primitive level is survival. If we're in a survival response and we're consistently under adrenaline and we're consistently under distress, it's going to be extremely hard to try to balance out other hormones and extremely hard to try and change shit in our life when we're stressed out because we're in flight, fight, and freeze response. We're just acting under survival. The way out of that is you work on those 3 pillars that I spoke about earlier that I go through at our Thrive Time event. Now, finally, I want to deal with procrastination. Procrastination is normally a byproduct of having an unclear mission and unclear goals, and then setting a task that you want to achieve which isn't linked to the values. So when you have your values, and then when you set a task or a goal and there's a misalignment, what will happen is that your brain will create some form of a self-sabotage pattern, but also procrastination, because your brain's trying to figure out how it actually helps you to achieve the things that you want. So I'll give you an example. I had this one for a while and I couldn't figure it out, but then once I got it, I was like, now I know exactly what it's trying to do. So I would start working on some projects and I would be in my office. Now I'm lucky I get to work from home. Jess also has her office, so she's essentially the CEO of the company now. So I sit here, I start working, I start doing all this detailed data work, and then I go, I'm just going to check Facebook. And I hop on Facebook and I start, in the next second I'm scrolling, and then I look and I'm like, an hour later, I've still been scrolling. For ages, I kept thinking, why do I keep self-sabotaging? Why am I procrastinating? Why am I putting off doing this task? Now, it wasn't until I realized that based on my values, my number one value is connection. So if I don't feel like I'm connected with people when I'm doing tasks, I will find a task where I can perceive that I get connection from it. And so I can procrastinate, not because I'm just trying to avoid doing the task, but it's because I'm actually getting my values met through the other task. So the point that I'm trying to make is that if there is a mismatch between the task that you're doing and your values, your brain will always go for the thing that it perceives it gets the most value out of. So when I understood that, I went, shit, what I need to do is I need to grab my values and I need to link the task that I'm doing to my values. And when you do that, you're essentially creating an alignment within your brain structure, within the neurological structures of your brain, which are linking doing the task to something purposeful, meaningful that makes you fulfilled. Once you do that, you don't procrastinate. So most weeks I have it happen where I'll go to do a task and I start working on it, and then I go, I'll just go get a coffee. Then I'll come back, I'll just go to the bathroom. And then I come back and I'll just go check with Jess. And then I catch myself. Once I catch myself and I'm self-aware, I go, I need to link the task that I'm doing to the fulfilling meaning and the values, because once I link them, my brain goes, doing this is important because it helps me to achieve the things that are meaningful to me in life. And then I get it done. So I normally have my journal, which sits right here, which is essentially just a notebook. But I have a journal sitting here so that I can grab my journal, which is, like I said, it's just a lined notebook. I will jump in there and I will link stuff to my values if I find myself procrastinating. And I'll link stuff to my mission so that by doing that task, I feel fulfilled in doing it, which then makes me want to do it instead of avoid doing it. Because all your brain's trying to do is try to figure out how it can get the most value out of the day. That's all it's trying to do. So there is no real such thing as procrastination. It's essentially just a misprioritization of what your brain is really trying to get fulfillment out of. Now, would I rather go and hang out with people and chat to people or be on Facebook? The truth is, I'd rather go and do it. But your brain will take a suboptimal response to get its values met if it can't get the optimal values met. So by doing that task, is it optimal that I'm on Facebook? No. But my brain's trying to figure out, well, if I can't go and hang out with people and I can't go and do things where I perceive that I'm getting connection, I might as well go for the suboptimal format, which is through Facebook or through social media. So I'm still getting my values met. It's just my perception is that I'm procrastinating, and my perception is that I'm self-sabotaging, when my brain is just actually giving me exactly what I want that's fulfilling throughout the day. There's no real such thing as self-sabotage, and there's no real such thing as procrastination. It's just that you're getting your values met in suboptimal ways, or there is a mismatch between goals, your mission, your values, and your brain's trying to figure it all out. And so it will create self-sabotage patterns, and that's part of it. Now, if you self-sabotage and you compare it to what you think it should be, then you can also create a self-depreciating behavior where your brain becomes chaotic and you start to beat yourself up. But that's also a learned behavior from people around you. If you watch your parents self-depreciate, if you watch your mum self-depreciate or your dad self-depreciate or grandparents, you can naturally pick that up and you can start to do it. Young children don't really self-depreciate, but they will as they start to grow up because they learn it from someone else around them. and then they'll start to beat themselves up, or they start to say negative shit about themselves, and then that internalizes. And so a lot of that internal dialogue is just learned behavior. And so it's something that I had to pick up on. And, I'm very cautious of my self-talk. I'm very cautious of being self-depreciating. I used to do it quite a lot, but just over time, I just catch myself and I'm like, fuck it, there's 8 billion people on the planet. I'm assuming that there's a lot of people out there who don't like me based on values disconnect, based on past experience with me, based on the fact that they just don't like my face. Why am I beating myself up? Why am I self-depreciating and calling myself a piece of shit and lazy? I'm sure there's someone else out there who are very willing to do it for me. So, you got to make sure that you're strong in here so that then when you do great things in life, all of that negative shit's going to come from the outside anyway. You've got to control that on the inside. Now, I'm not saying be positive and over-exaggerate, because that also makes people fucking loony. Just like a lot of negativity makes people crazy as well. You just want to keep it nice and stable. Look for the benefits and the drawbacks of stuff. There's a benefit to being criticized and there's a drawback to being criticized. There's a benefit to being appreciated and there's a drawback to being appreciated. So you need to start to learn how to balance and keep your brain in balance and your emotions in balance. Most people waste their life, and I just don't want you to be one of them.